Mary had lived most of her life listening rather than reading, watching rather than writing, and memorizing shapes and colors instead of letters. She was 57 years old when she finally admitted to herself that the silence inside her was heavier than the fear she had carried since childhood. As a girl, she had never gone to school. Her family believed work was more important than books, and survival mattered more than dreams. She learned how to cook, clean, raise children, and respect elders, but she never learned how to read her own name on paper. For decades, Mary built her world through memory. She recognized shops by signs and trees, roads by smells and sounds, and people by footsteps. She smiled and nodded when papers were placed in front of her. She pressed her thumb where others signed. She laughed when jokes were told about letters because laughter was easier than truth. Inside, she felt small, as if the world spoke a language she was not allowed to learn. When her children grew older, they brought books home from school. They asked her questions about words and homework. She made excuses and told stories to hide her secret. Sometimes she asked neighbors for help. Sometimes she guessed. Sometimes she cried alone at night, wondering why life had chosen this path for her. She believed learning was only for the young and that her time had passed. One evening, at a community meeting, a woman stood up and read a notice aloud. It was about an adult literacy class starting in a nearby center. The woman said anyone could join, no matter the age, no matter the past. Mary felt her heart beat faster. The words adult and anyone stayed in her mind like a soft song. She went home thinking of letters like small keys that could open locked rooms in her life. For weeks, Mary argued with herself. Fear told her she was too old. Shame told her people would laugh. Hope whispered that it was not too late. On a quiet morning, she wrapped her shawl tightly around her shoulders and walked to the community center. Her steps were slow but determined. Each step felt like leaving an old skin behind. Inside the room were wooden benches and a chalkboard. The teacher smiled warmly and welcomed everyone. There were men and women, older and younger, all carrying their own stories. Mary sat at the back, feeling her hands shake. When the teacher wrote the first letter on the board, Mary stared at it like it was a stranger and a friend at the same time. The first lessons were painful. Mary struggled to connect sounds with shapes. Her head hurt and her eyes burned. She wanted to give up many times. But every time she thought of leaving, she remembered her children and the years she had stayed silent. She stayed. At home, she practiced secretly, tracing letters in the air and drawing them on the ground with a stick. She whispered sounds while cooking and washing. She felt foolish and proud at the same time. Slowly, letters became words, and words became meaning. One day, she read a simple sentence on her own. Tears ran down her face because for the first time, the world spoke to her directly. As weeks turned into months, Mary changed. She stood straighter, she asked questions, she laughed louder. Literacy did not just give her skills, it gave her a voice. She began helping other women in class, encouraging them when they felt tired. She shared her story openly and found strength in honesty. The community noticed the change. Mary spoke during meetings now. She read notices aloud. She helped neighbors fill forms. She was no longer invisible. People listened when she spoke because her words carried truth and courage. Mary did not know it yet, but this small beginning was the first step towards something greater. Her journey was no longer just about reading. It was about leading and lifting others with her. This was only the start. Mary continued attending the literacy class every day except Sunday. Her routine slowly reshaped her life. She woke before sunrise, prepared breakfast, and then practiced reading words written on old papers the teacher had given her. Each word felt like a small victory. She no longer hid her books. She carried them openly, and this alone made her feel brave. The teacher noticed Mary's effort and dedication. She often stayed after class, asking for extra help. She wanted to read faster and understand deeper meanings. She did not want to stop at simple sentences. She wanted to read notices, letters, and stories. Her hunger for learning surprised even herself. At home, her children began to notice the change. One afternoon, her youngest daughter handed her a school book and asked her to read aloud. Mary's hands trembled, but she did it, slowly and carefully. Her voice was not perfect, but it was real. Her daughter hugged her tightly. That moment filled Mary's heart with pride. She realized learning was not only changing her life, but also her family future. As Mary's confidence grew, she started helping other learners in the class. Some were older than her and some younger, but all shared the same fear of failure. Mary spoke to them with kindness. She told them learning had no age and no shame. Her words came from experience, and people listened. Outside the classroom, Mary began to see problems in her community more clearly. She could now read notices about water shortages, health camps, and local meetings. She realized many people missed opportunities simply because they could not read. She remembered her own years of silence and decided she did not want others to feel the same. One evening, the community leader asked if anyone could help organize a small meeting about sanitation. Mary surprised herself by raising her hand. She volunteered to help read announcements and invite neighbors. It was the first time she stepped into a public role. Her voice shook, but her resolve was strong. She went door to door, reading notices aloud, explaining the purpose of the meeting. People were curious and impressed. Many did not know Mary could read now. They saw her with new respect. The meeting was successful, and the leader thanked her publicly. Mary felt something awaken inside her, a sense of responsibility and purpose. After that day, Mary became more involved. She attended local gatherings and listened carefully. She asked questions and shared ideas. She spoke about education, health, and unity. Her words were simple but powerful because they came from lived experience. Some people doubted her at first. They whispered about her age and past. But Mary did not let doubt stop her. She remembered the pain of staying silent and chose courage instead. Each time she spoke, her voice grew steadier. The literacy class eventually ended, but Mary's learning did not. She borrowed books from neighbors and practiced reading newspapers slowly. She learned new words every day. She wrote her own name again and again, filling pages with it. Her name no longer felt like a secret. One day, the teacher visited Mary's home. She told her that a community training program was starting for local leaders and encouraged Mary to apply. The idea frightened her, but also excited her. She knew leadership required reading, writing, and speaking skills, but she also knew she had already begun walking that path. Mary applied with the help of her teacher. When she was accepted, she felt disbelief and joy. The program taught communication, problem-solving, and planning. Mary struggled at first, but she never gave up. She studied harder than ever before. During group activities, she shared her story openly. She spoke about illiteracy, poverty, and resilience. Her story moved others. They saw strength where she once saw weakness. They encouraged her to continue. Mary realized her past was not something to hide. It was her greatest strength. It allowed her to understand people deeply and lead with compassion. She was no longer just learning for herself. She was learning for her community. Her journey was growing beyond the classroom and into the hearts of those around her. She was becoming a voice for the voiceless without even realizing how far she had come. The road ahead was still long, but Mary was ready to walk it. The leadership training changed the way Mary saw herself and the world. Around her were men and women who had studied longer and spoken louder in their lives. At first, she felt small again, but she reminded herself of the road she had already walked. Every lesson she struggled through had prepared her for this moment. She listened carefully and learned with patience. Mary began to understand how decisions were made in her community. She learned about planning meetings, writing proposals, and solving conflicts. These were new ideas, but they felt familiar because they were connected to everyday life. She thought about the water problems, the school needs, and the women who still hid their illiteracy like she once did. During one session, participants were asked to speak about a problem they wanted to solve. Mary stood up slowly. Her hands shook, but her voice was clear. She spoke about adult literacy and how many women lived in silence. She explained how learning to read had changed her life and given her dignity. The room grew quiet. People listened deeply. Some nodded, and some wiped tears. That moment marked a shift. Others began to approach Mary for advice. They asked her how she found the courage to start learning so late. She told them courage came after the first step, not before. Her honesty made her respected and trusted. Mary was asked to help organize a small literacy circle in her neighborhood. She agreed, even though fear returned. She gathered a few women under a tree and began teaching them letters, the same way she had learned. Slowly, the circle grew. More women joined, bringing their sisters and neighbors. Mary prepared simple lessons and practiced every night. Teaching others strengthened her own skills. She became more confident in reading and writing. She also learned how to listen patiently and encourage gently. She understood their shame because it had once been hers. She never judged, only supported. As the literacy circle grew, it caught the attention of local officials. They visited one day and observed quietly. They saw women reading aloud, laughing, and supporting one another. They asked Mary about the project. She explained her vision of a community where no one felt small because of illiteracy. The officials invited Mary to speak at a larger community forum. This time, she did not hesitate. She prepared her speech carefully, writing and rewriting it until it felt right. On the day of the forum, she stood before a crowd much larger than she had ever faced. Her heart raced, but she remembered the first letter she had learned and smiled. Mary spoke about change from the ground up. She talked about how education transformed lives, families, and futures. She did not use big words, but she spoke with truth. The crowd applauded loudly. Some stood in respect. After that day, Mary's name began to spread. People called her a leader, though she still felt like a learner. She was invited to meetings and asked for opinions. Her voice mattered now. Not everyone supported her. Some believed a woman who learned late had no place in leadership. Mary faced criticism and resistance, but she stood firm. She reminded herself that change always meets fear. She continued working quietly and consistently. Her literacy circle expanded into nearby areas. Volunteers joined and helped. She trained others to teach basic reading and writing. The movement grew beyond her imagination. Mary's life was now filled with purpose. She woke each day knowing she was making a difference. She was no longer invisible or silent. She was seen, heard, and trusted. The woman who once hid from letters was now opening doors for others. Mary understood that leadership was not about position. It was about service and courage. Her journey was reaching a turning point that would test her strength in new ways. As Mary's influence grew, the community began to face a period of change. Local elections were approaching, and discussions filled every gathering. People talked about leadership, responsibility, and representation. For the first time, Mary's name was mentioned as a possible candidate. She was shocked when she heard it and quickly dismissed the idea, believing it was far beyond her reach. The suggestion stayed with her, though. It followed her into her quiet moments and her busy days. She thought about the women she taught, the families she helped, and the problems she had learned to understand. She also thought about her past and the years she could not read. She wondered if the community would truly accept someone like her. Friends and neighbors encouraged her. They reminded her that leadership was already part of her life. They told her she earned trust through service, not education alone. Her teacher also supported her and said her journey was proof that growth never ends. These words slowly changed Mary's fear into determination. Mary decided to stand for the position. She announced her decision at a community meeting. Her voice was steady, though her heart beat fast. She did not promise miracles. She promised honesty, hard work, and inclusion. People listened carefully. Some were surprised, but many nodded in agreement. The campaign was not easy. Mary faced criticism and mockery. Some opponents whispered about her age and past illiteracy. Others tried to scare her into withdrawing. But Mary had faced fear before and survived. She focused on her message and her people. She went door to door, listening to concerns and sharing her vision. She read her own campaign materials and wrote simple messages of hope. She spoke in small gatherings and large meetings alike. Each time she spoke, she remembered the first time she had walked into the literacy class. Her journey gave her strength. Women especially stood by her side. They saw themselves in her story and believed in her leadership. They helped spread her message and supported her efforts. The literacy circles became centers of discussion and empowerment. On election day, Mary stood quietly as votes were counted. She felt calm regardless of the outcome because she knew she had already changed lives. When the results were announced, her name was called as the winner. A wave of emotion washed over her. Tears filled her eyes as the community applauded. Mary thanked everyone and promised to serve with humility. She knew this was not the end, but a new beginning. Leadership brought new challenges, meetings, paperwork, and decisions. But Mary approached them with the same patience she used to learn letters. She asked questions and sought advice. She continued learning every day. As a community leader, she focused on education, health, and inclusion. She supported adult literacy programs and encouraged young girls to stay in school. She made sure voices from the margins were heard. Mary never forgot where she started. She often visited the literacy circles and shared her story, reminding learners that change was possible at any age. Her presence inspired many to take their first step. The woman who once hid from paper and pen was now opening doors for others. Mary understood that leadership was not about position. It was about service and courage. Her journey was reaching a turning point that would test her strength in new ways. As Mary's influence grew, the community began to face a period of change. Local elections were approaching, and discussions filled every gathering. People talked about leadership, responsibility, and representation. For the first time, Mary's name was mentioned as a possible candidate. She was shocked when she heard it and quickly dismissed the idea, believing it was far beyond her reach. The suggestion stayed with her, though. It followed her into her quiet moments and her busy days. She thought about the women she taught, the families she helped, and the problems she had learned to understand. She also thought about her past and the years she could not read. She wondered if the community would truly accept someone like her. Friends and neighbors encouraged her. They reminded her that leadership was already part of her life. They told her she earned trust through service, not education alone. Her teacher also supported her and said her journey was proof that growth never ends. These words slowly changed Mary's fear into determination. Mary decided to stand for the position. She announced her decision at a community meeting. Her voice was steady, though her heart beat fast. She did not promise miracles. She promised honesty, hard work, and inclusion. People listened carefully. Some were surprised, but many nodded in agreement. The campaign was not easy. Mary faced criticism and mockery. Some opponents whispered about her age and past illiteracy. Others tried to scare her into withdrawing, but Mary had faced fear before and survived. She focused on her message and her people. She went door to door, listening to concerns and sharing her vision. She read her own campaign materials and wrote simple messages of hope. She spoke in small gatherings and large meetings alike. Each time she spoke, she remembered the first time she had walked into the literacy class. Her journey gave her strength. Women especially stood by her side. They saw themselves in her story and believed in her leadership. They helped spread her message and supported her efforts. The literacy circles became centers of discussion and empowerment. On election day, Mary stood quietly as votes were counted. She felt calm regardless of the outcome because she knew she had already changed lives. When the results were announced, her name was called as the winner. A wave of emotion washed over her. Tears filled her eyes as the community applauded. Mary thanked everyone